Welcome to BK Academy of Chess. This is Black Knight. This is a composition by Richard Reti, and it is white to move. How should white play? Rook to f8 is incorrect. It's a good try because it does attack one of the connected pass pawns. However, the correct answer is rook to g8, attacking the outside pawn. Now, let's take a look at this. Now here, how should black play? King d5 is incorrect because white simply takes the g pawn, and here white has many ways to hold for the draw. I like this one in particular because it attacks the king, and when the king steps away, it attacks the pawn. Now the pawn makes it to the second rank, but there the position becomes paralyzed because with the king in front of the pawn, he attacks the b pawn. As soon as the king steps out, he checks the king. The king steps away from the pawn, he attacks the pawn. And so I ask again, how should black play? He has to push the b pawn for the win. Now, how should black play? Again, he must push the b pawn for the win. Now I have an interesting try for white. Now you might be asking, Black Knight, why would white allow the king to help the pawns promote? Well, white is setting a trap. Here, how should black play? Moving the king to the third rank is incorrect. The rook attacks one of the pawns. If black promotes one of the pawns, pushes one of the pawns, he takes with check and then covers the promotion rank. So the king has to get off of the third rank. So how should white play to hold this position? He has to check the king. If he attacks the f pawn, the b pawn will promote. Right? Now, if the king attacks the rook simply moves back to attacking the b pawn, and we're back to where we started. So we have this, right? Now, how should white play to hold this position? Now, he cannot attack one of the pawns as he did before because he cannot take the pawn with check to give his rook time to cover the promotion rank. So when in doubt, use BK's rule. Check the king, right? Now, what white is trying to do is to draw the king back to the third rank where he can attack the far side pawn, giving him a chance to take the pawn with check to cover the promotion rank, right? So, there we go. We just keep holding this position. If the king moves in front of the pawn, we attack the other pawn, and white holds for the draw. So I ask again, how should black play for the win? King to e5 is the correct answer, because now the rook cannot attack the pawn and take the pawn without the other promoting. With the king on the third rank, he takes the pawn with check, which gives the rook time to cover the promotion rank. So, white checks the king. So how should black play for the win? Here he attacks the rook. The rook has no more checks, and it takes two moves to attack the b pawn and take it. Now if he tries to harass the king from behind, we have something like this. Now, how should black play for the win? The b pawn is just too close to the promotion rank in order for white to hold the position. Okay, let's take a look at rook to g1. How should black play? King to d4 is incorrect. So how should white play? He checks the king. Now, white can hold this position, but what is black's best try? King to e4, because if the king comes down to the third rank, the rook attacks the far side pawn and will have time to take it and return back to the promotion rank. So, how should white play? This move is incorrect. It works from behind, but not from in front, and we shall see. So, how should black play? You see here, the king moves behind the pawn, not in front of the pawn, as was the case when the rook was attacking from behind. Now, when the rook goes to attack the b pawn, the f pawn promotes because the king is not in front. So I asked again, how should white play for the draw? The answer is rook to d2, right? Trying to draw the king to the third rank, and we saw how we draw there. And if the king pushes behind the pawn, we attack the b pawn, and now the f pawn cannot push. So we take the b pawn and then return back to the promotion rank to hold for the draw. So let's take a look to see how black wins. He pushes one of the pawns, in this case the f pawn. He attacks the pawn, but the b pawn pushes. Now the rook is doing its thing, so why not bring in the king? Unfortunately, his king is too late, and the game's over. Now let's take a look to see how easy it is for white to hold this position by attacking the outside pawn, forcing it to push where he can take the f pawn. Notice the separation between the pawns. White just covers the promotion square and he waits for the king to make a move. The black king has made his move. It looks like he's going to try to promote the g pawn. So how should white play this position? Right, he attacks the other pawn so that when the king jumps to f2, he takes the pawn with check, winning the other pawn. So how should white now play? The white king looks like he's making the move to promote the b pawn. So he switches to the other side. Thanks for tuning in to BK Academy.